Hello there, I'm Woolly Wormhead, and in today's tutorial, I want to talk to you about something a little bit different. I'm going to show you how you can work a German short row into a provisional cast on, because yes, you can do it, and then how to remove the provisional cast on and maintain the underside of that short row so that you can go off and graft it. Now, bear in mind that I like short rows a lot, and I tend to do a lot of work that kind of pushes the boundaries of what we understand about with short rows. You can graft them, you can knit them backwards, you can cable them, you can do, yeah, just about anything you can do with a short row. It's just a short rowed stitch. It's a technique for bridging a gap between incomplete rows, and we can treat it much like we can treat most of our other stitches. Um, and so today is going to be showing you how to do a German short row in a provisional cast on. Now, if you're wondering, well, why? Well, patterns like this is penumbral from my latest collection, Filineal, that's coming out in September 2025. So if you're reading this in the future, it's already available. And the reason why I put German short rows in the provisional cast on is that I wanted to maintain just a single ridge of the background colour between the motif. And that meant technically some of the short rows that happened down here needed to be worked into the provisional cast on. Otherwise, I'd have needed two ridges of the background colour between each to avoid having this. And I was being a perfectionist and I didn't want to do that. Essentially, I like kind of nice clean lines and keeping repeats close together. Now, it doesn't mean that I've made the pattern impossibly hard just because I'm a perfectionist. Working a German short row into a provisional cast on is not difficult. It's just something that's new that maybe you've not done before. And the fiddly bit, the bit that you have to pay attention to, is removing the provisional cast on to make sure that you can maintain the stitches underneath. And I'm going to show you how to do all of that. Now, before I switch the overhead, we just need a little reminder of what a short row is and what we know of short row techniques. Now, a short row is where a row is incomplete. We might have a row, say, of 20 stitches. We knit 10 across, we turn and go back. And the next time we go to knit across all of those, there's a kind of like one or two row or one ridge kind of like ledge there that needs to be kind of like knit across. And a lot of the time when you knit across it, you get a gap. The techniques that we know as German short rows or wrap and turn short rows, etc., are actually the technique that we use to try and bridge that gap and reduce the hole that we might get in our knitting when we knit across a short row. So the German short row actually creates, or the German short row technique rather, creates a short rowed stitch that's a double leg stitch. The wrap and turn method creates a stitch that gets wrapped. All right, these are short rowed stitches that are created by the technique. The rest of the knitting is still the rest of the knitting. The short row is just the short row, the incomplete row, and the short row technique is what bridges that gap. Now, for some people, they don't need to use a short row technique. Their gauge and knitting style kind of covers up and you don't get a gap, which is fantastic for them. I'm really envious of that. Some people might do a wrap and turn in garter stitch and just not pick up the wraps and knit across because for them it doesn't notice. Again, envious of that one. So I just wanted to quickly recap that because one of the ways that we deal with the underside of the German short row is going to kind of like make that little kind of jog apparent. And for the most part, it's nothing to worry about, but we just need to keep in mind that the short row is the short row and the technique that we know bridges the gap. And you don't always have to use something to bridge the gap if you're one of those lucky people that has perfect knitting styles. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch to the overhead. I've got some stitches already provisionally cast on. I'm going to go straight into showing you how you can work the German short rows into the provisional cast on, what they look like. And then we're going to get into the nitty gritty of revealing the stitches by removing the provisional cast on step by step and having a look at what happens. Okay then, on my needles here, I have 20 stitches provisionally cast on. I'm using 5mm needles because I want this to be nice and loose so I can show you what the stitches look like. And I have got this kind of rustic pinkish, darkish pink. There's a name for this, I'm sure, this colour. Worsted weight yarn. So I'm using a slightly lighter weight yarn for the needles again so that it's fairly loose and I can show you what it looks like because tight stitches, you're not going to see all the detail. Now, I have a tutorial already for the crochet provisional cast on. I will link to that, so I'm not going to go into that too heavily. I'm going to do what I always recommend, and that is when you change to your main yarn, just link this up at the bottom here, put a little knot in, because that, when you anchors your working yarn there and it stops it coming undone, because it can do. It will want to try and wiggle its way out. So I am going to work 5 stitches and then I'm going to put a German short row on here. So I'm going to work in garter stitch because I love it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see that yarn is already trying to pull out there. Now, you'll know, hopefully, if you've watched some of my other tutorials, that I am particularly adamant about making sure that you understand where your short rowed stitch is going to be. Now, because a German short row is based on a knit stitch, some patterns are written so that the last stitch worked becomes the double-legged stitch. But in my patterns, I will say K5 short row, which means that you knit 5 and then you work the short row on the next stitch. So if you're doing a wrap and turn, that's the one you wrap. If you're doing a German short row, that becomes your double leg stitch. All right, so I've knit 5. I'm now going to knit this next one. And I'll link to my more in-depth tutorial on German short rows as well, so that you can see it in more detail. We're going to slip that back over because we need to disappear this stitch, and this stitch that we knit underneath becomes our double leg stitch. Anchor your needle in there because that stops everything moving around and you get a nice tight double leg stitch. And then you knit across back towards the end. So we have created our first short row here. There's the double leg stitch. This tiny little bit here is the disappeared stitch. And there's the double leg. Don't worry about the fact that it's in waste yarn. It's fine. There'll be a way to unravel it. So I'm going to put now 2 more in. So I'm going to do K10 short row and then K15 short row. So there is short row every 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, one of my preview knitters for the hat that I showed you, Penumbral, suggested putting stitch markers on where they were going to work the short rows. So this isn't something I do. We're trying this tip out and I'm going to do it in 2 different ways. So I'm going to put the stitch marker here before I work the short rows so that we know that after that, when we remove the provisional cast on, is the short row stitch. I use these little light bulb ones, these, because they can be hooked onto a stitch, but use whatever you have. It's getting in the way slightly, so I've got to be careful not to drop it. All right. Actually, this is a good point. That we need to put that over there before we work our double leg stitch. That's it. It's in the right place now. And then I'm going to do one more, and I'm actually going to put the stitch marker on the double leg stitch because these are like little safety pin ones, so I can actually put it into the stitch that's going to get worked. Okay, so we've got a stitch marker right before the short row there. So I'm going to do K15 and then do another short row. It's all right, spiders just walked across my table. Gone away, just in case you saw a kind of like face. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, All right, it was only a little spider. We get wolf spiders here. Fortunately, that wasn't a wolf spider. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. So I'm now going to use one of these stitch markers again. I'm going to knit this one so I can create the double leg stitch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually hook this onto this stitch here so we can see if that helps us in removing the provisional cast on and showing us where the short row is. So let's knit back. And then we'll look at, I'll remember that stitch marker there. And we'll look at how this looks from the underside. And I'll have a look at where the short rows actually are. I'll put my cast on. Okay, so we have one here, we have one here, and we have one here. The stitch marker for that is actually on one of the legs of the double leg stitch. This stitch marker sits right before the short rows worked, and this one down here doesn't have a marker at all. We just know it's after the 5th stitch, 2, 4, 5, so it's down there. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to knit a complete row across, and then I'm going to knit a body of knitting, like put a couple of inches on here or something, so that when I remove the provisional cast on, we've got some fabric on there and it'll be easier for you to see how we remove it. So I'm going to go away and do that bit of knitting, and then I'll come back and we'll have a look at that. Okay then, I am back with my piece of knitting that I have here. I've put it on a spare cable because I might graft these stitches later, but by having it on a cable, it's a bit more flexible than a needle and it doesn't get in the way of us removing the provisional cast on. Now, one thing I realized as I was knitting this piece of knitting is that this stitch marker I put on the needle, whereas actually it should be on the provisional cast on chain. So don't make the same mistake that I did. What I've got to do is I've got to kind of like trace back. I've got another one here, thankfully. It's going to come all the way down here. It sits underneath this set of ridges here. So let me just come down. So it goes on this section of the chain here. Let's put it through there. So it actually goes onto one stitch. So if you do put stitch markers in, put them on the chain and not on the needle like I did. So this one went into the stitch. This one's on the chain. All right. Now, when we remove a provisional cast on, we actually take it out from the side that we started knitting with. So we've got this long chain here. This is the side we take it out from. Now, as I say in my provisional cast on tutorial video, we take our provisional cast on out slowly. You don't want to rip it out too quickly because the last thing you need is to drop stitches on the other underside, and that's definitely the last thing you need when you are dealing with short rows in your provisional cast on. So I always recommend take them out stitch by stitch. See how easy it likes to unravel? That's really tempting to rip the whole lot out, but don't. So put that yarn tail back there. There's our first stitch that needs to be revealed. So before I take that out, I'm going to have the provisional cast on yarn, the waste yarn over this side, and I'm going to put the needle in here into the stitch to catch it so that it doesn't get dropped. And we're going to do that all the way across. Don't worry, as I say in my main tutorial, don't worry about them being the wrong orientation when you take them out of the provisional cast on. You can reorientate them after. Take them out in the way that's most comfortable for you. It doesn't matter if they're orientated incorrectly, you can change that later. Right, so we've got a situation. We can see here that our stitches are starting to look a bit different, and that's because a short row has been worked there in the provisional cast on. So we put our needle in just the same because you've got to make sure that you catch that stitch. Pull that one through, and what you'll see here is that the provisional cast on goes inside there and it's attached to the underside of that stitch there. Now, what I'm going to suggest you do is you either pull this up loose, this next stitch that's about to be undone, or you do something sensible like put a little hooked stitch marker on it, because you do not want that to come undone as you are working this particular step. So the front part of the waist yarn, I recommend pulling through. You can cut it if you want to. But what you will see here is the other side there, and we're pulling that through. And what we're going to do is we're going to catch the underside of that stitch there and catch this loop. Now that's what it looks like when you pull it through. So at this point, if you let go of this loop and lose it, it will not unravel, it will just disappear into your knitting. And what you'll get is you'll get the equivalent of not having used a short row technique between the short rows. So you remember at the beginning how we talked about we have a short row is kind of like a little ledge between the row, between that and the row below, and we use the short row technique to bridge that gap. If you drop this, you'll just have that gap. It's still totally okay. You'll be able to graft it, and because it's a provisional cast on, the stitches are normally tighter when we release them. It's not going to be loose and saggy. So if you find that unraveling your provisional cast on is difficult and this loop you can't catch it, don't worry about it. Just pull the cast on out and carry on, because this will become like the second half of the German short row. So what I'm going to recommend, if you want to carry on and recreate a German short row, because we're working from the underside, so we're not dealing with a German short row as you know it, we're going to create a mock-up of a German short row. What you want to do is to put that loop onto the needle and then pull your provisional cast on all the way out. And you can see what's happened there. It's already started to look like a German short row. Clever, huh? Now, I was saying about that stitch, you see what happened as I was working there? That was trying to come undone. But because I put that hooked marker on there, that stitch didn't come undone, and we didn't drop this stitch from the underside, because that's always at risk of being dropped when you're trying to unravel the stitches. So a hooked marker keeps hold of that, or you can just pull it through and make a big loop, whichever way. But just pay attention to that one and make sure it doesn't get dropped. I think this is one place where people go wrong with this. Not so much in pulling the loop, it's the stitches that get dropped as you try and maneuver the short rows. So let's pull that out, and we're now back to our regular unraveling of the provisional cast on. Now we've got a short row, we've got a stitch marker here to indicate the short row, and it's in the place right by where the short row is. It's actually, because I had to move it, this was the one that I had to move, it's actually caught a little bit of this yarn here. So let me put my needle in to that loop and take that out, because we don't need that anymore. Okay, but this one, which was the one that we do not want to come undone, I'm gonna right, we need to pull this one out, and it's this one that we don't want to come undone, so we want to pull that loop through, or again put something on it to stop it, because we do not want that to drop, because if that drops, that stitch there drops. So there is again the other half of the double leg stitch. The stitch marker told us we were coming up to a short rowed stitch. What we need to do, again, you can cut it, but I don't, because I'm really frugal. I've talked about this before. I reuse my waste yarn. I always use cotton, and I reuse it over and over again until it's falling apart, because it's just how I am. Pull this front loop through. If it helps, pinch the work here to stop that stitch unraveling. And then, again, this is where it gets a bit tricky to make sure you don't drop any stitches. You want to pull that loop through here, this one, but pull it from this side, not that side, because that side will undo the stitch and you'll drop it. So pull it through here. You don't have to pull it all the way through, just pull it through sufficiently so that as you pull it, you get another loop, and you pop that on there, and you get your mock German short row. And now we can take that waste yarn out completely. We were smart and we pulled this loop through, so it meant this stitch didn't get dropped, because the first recording I did of this tutorial, right, that stitch kept getting dropped. I was kind of like, come on, self, sort it out. You know, give some tips, make sure you're not dropping the stitches, because otherwise, you know. So that's what I learned very, very quickly, is that I have to grab this one to make sure it doesn't drop. And we carry on, releasing each stitch step by step, one at a time. And then we get to this point here, and we know, again, because we've got this unusual little scenario going on in our provisional cast on, it looks a bit odd, that we know that we've got another short row. So we put our stitch, this loop, needle into it, that stitch goes onto the needle. We pull that loop through. Now, if you remember on this one, that just fell off. What we did was actually put that onto the double leg stitch as we were knitting it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back onto this loop at the back here, because we do not want that coming undone while we deal with this underside loop from the German short row. So again, pull this through and then pull that one from this side, take up the slack here, and then together pull them. All right, so you've got them sitting like that, pull them, make that loop, put it up onto the needle, and then you can carry on removing the rest of the provisional cast on. We can take this hooked marker off now, because it's done its job of making sure that we catch the stitch first, but it's done its job of making sure that we don't drop any stitches from the underside. And we work towards the end. And we release the last stitch. And there we have our released stitches. Now, at this point, they are perfectly graftable. They actually look exactly like a German short row. Clever, huh? And it's not difficult to do. You just got to make sure that you don't drop the next stitch, and make sure you catch that loop and put it back on the needle. So what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to really, really, really quickly reorientate these. So that they're all in the correct position. Because the way that I unpick my provisional cast on usually means that the stitches end up orientated the wrong way around. And then I'm going to show you the final trick for absolutely perfecting this, which again is not critical, but it makes a huge difference. But you might decide it's not worth your time and you're happy to graft them as they are like this. And honestly, if you graft them at this point, it's going to work. You're not going to have any problems, because you just treat that like you would do a German short row. And I've got a tutorial for grafting German short rows, and I'll link that. Now, this final step really does kind of like, it's the real proper polish of this technique. You remember that we started by doing K5, then a short row. All right. We've actually got K4 here. So this final step actually turns this into an even truer short row. Not quite true one, because obviously it's the underside, but it's close to a German short row as we can get. And it puts the short rows in the correct position, because currently they're one stitch over. So we 1, 2, 3, 4. And now what we're going to do, we're going to have a little look at what's going on when we pull this stitch and its loop apart. Now, from my German short row tutorial, you may well remember that the loop that is the disappeared stitch belongs to the short row, and the double leg stitch belongs to the row below. All right, you might want to go and watch that one and remember it. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go, right, okay, maybe that loop doesn't belong with that stitch. Maybe that is the disappeared stitch and it belongs with this one here, and we need to rebuild it like a German short row. And yeah, I have a tutorial for how to rebuild and repair a German short row. So the first step, actually, we'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get a smaller needle out because this makes it a little bit easier. It's a different color needle. Yeah, this is a lot smaller needle. This is a 3.5, but it makes it easier. So I'm going to put these stitches back on. I'm going to do it on a smaller needle because this does get really tight. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's okay for it to get tight. Actually, using a smaller needle to undo your provisional cast on is actually not a bad idea. So we go back to this position. We have the 2 loops here. This loop belonged to the underside of that stitch. We saw that when we took the provisional cast on out. And that's what the disappeared stitch is. It's connected to the last stitch on the short row. So to repair a German short row, we lift this up and we twist it backwards because this is representing the loop that gets disappeared. This next stitch gets treated as the double leg stitch. So to recreate a German short row, we lift that over the disappeared loop. And then what we'll do with our needle is we grab the other half of the disappeared loop, see that there? And we put it back on the needle. And then while we're here, we check the orientation of that stitch and see if it needs reorientating, which it does. And there we have K5 German short row, which is exactly what we had in our pattern when we were working in the beginning. So we come to the next one. We've got this same situation here. We've got the loop and the stitch. We treat this as the disappeared loop. So we twist it backwards, pass the stitch that's going to become the double leg stitch over it, and then we very carefully, you see what I'm doing there? That's the same loop. I'm just putting it in the other side. So the stitch that's becomes the disappeared stitch, the stitch that was sitting on this side of the needle here is suspended over the loop. Put that back on. We check the orientation of this stitch because when we reorientated all the other ones, we didn't reorientate the short rows or the underside of the short rows. And there we have it. It looks like a perfect German short row. Ta-da! Magic. So you do not have to do this step. This might seem like an extra faff to you, and that's fine. Because if you don't do this, it's really not going to notice in your graft when you're working a short row colour work hat. It's really not. I just like to work out exactly how I can perfect things and get things as close as possible. So last repair, twist it, carry that one over. We have grabbed the loop from that side, pop it back on the needle and recheck the orientation of this one. And there we have, albeit on a slightly looser, smaller needle, so a little bit looser, our rebuilt German short rows with the correct stitch count before each short row as per the pattern that I did at the beginning, K5 short row. And there you have it. Cool, huh? I hope that's been helpful in showing you how you can work a German short row into a provisional cast on and how you can release the cast on and save your stitches ready for grafting. The key thing is to go slowly, carefully remove your provisional cast on, do it stitch by stitch, and as you encounter that point where there's been a German short row, make sure that you catch the stitch on the provisional cast on that follows it so that it doesn't come unraveled as you're dealing with the underside of the German short row. Because as I said, it did drop a couple of stitches when I was doing it the first time, and I'm practiced at rebuilding stitches from the underside, but I don't recommend you do that. It's extra time, it's a little bit stressful, you don't want to panic and thinking all your stitches are dropping. So just take care at that point. It's actually the stitch after the German short row or where the German short row has been put that you want to take care of. Now, whether or not you pull out the loop and put it onto the needle is entirely up to you. If you don't pull that loop out, it will just absorb into the fabric, and it will do that consistently for all of them, and it will graft perfectly and you won't notice it. If you do pull the loop out and put it on and you want to leave it at that point, that sort of second stage, that's cool too. It will work and you'll be able to graft all the way across. If you want to go the extra mile and shift the short row across and have it so that it looks even more like, this is the polish method, have it looking so much more like they would do from the top side of your knitting, then that's what the third step's about. But that steps 2 and 3 are not crucial to achieving a good graft when you're working German short rows into the provisional cast on. You can do it. I promise you, you can do it. Just take your time and go slowly. If you want to, practice on a swatch, but you're good. I promise you can do it. I hope it's not melted too many brains. I can get a bit carried away with short rows because I like doing things with them. If there is something that you've not encountered before in short rows or want to know, can you do this with short rows? Leave a comment below and I'll either answer yes or no and see if I can maybe do a tutorial on it. I like talking about short rows. So if you can do the like, subscribe, etc. thing, that'll be much appreciated while I'm growing my channel, because I have got so many things that I love to share, not just brain melting short row sorcery tutorials, but other things, especially things that are all related to hats. I really like to get my techniques and information out there. Thank you for your time, and I'll catch you next time.